Hey you guys, check this out. Just pipped my highest ever rapid rating. I've had a good few days. Something's shifted, right? So I've been touching on like 1500, waving about. This is the last 7 days. My highest was previously 1531. But you can see I've definitely been climbing for the last month or so. The average trend is going up, which means simply I'm winning a bit more than I'm losing. And now in the top, well within the top 4% of players on chess.com. So I'm a happy bunny today. So what I'm going to do is I want to take you through the game that I just played, which got me my record ratings. So my opponent's rated, well, at the start of this a little bit higher, 1532. And I was on 1525, I guess. Very interesting game. So here you can see the report. It says that my opponent got an early advantage and then lost it, and then got another advantage and then lost it, and then finally I was able to grab the victory. So let's go through the game because it's really sharp and it's really fun. So my opponent's called Evgen Genera from Russia by the look of it. Okay, and he starts with d4. I've got the black pieces and I go into the Benoni, which is this, expecting to have the Benko gambit. So d5 and then b5. All right, but my opponent here doesn't do that. He throws me out of my preparation already with d takes c5. And I simply didn't know what to do here. Now, apparently, according to the machine, the best move is simply e6 with the discovered attack by the bishop on the pawn. But I saw a fork, so I played queen a5 check, thinking that would be, basically that was the way I saw to win the pawn back. So there we go, a queen a5 check. Also, my opponent, we have to notice, is now captured away from the center with one of his central pawns. So it's not ideal. Okay, so he blocks with a knight, I grab the pawn. Out comes the other knight. Now I play e5. So figuring I want to grab control over the center if possible, and maybe even e4 would come, kicking that knight away, gaining tempo as well. But I'm already, you have to say I'm a little bit out of shape with my queen out in the middle of the board this early. So e4 now counters that, and my knight comes out. So we've got kind of like 4 knights with change, with a little bit of variety. Now this is a good move. Knight comes in, threatening c7, and the king rook fork. Okay, so I'm looking for ways to move this knight and create a discovered defense by my queen on that square. In the end, now I move my knight to a5. This also comes with the added bonus of we now have 2 attackers on this c4 pawn. It's defended only by the light squared bishop. So now my opponent goes on the offensive and attacks my queen. Okay, so I move queen to b4. It comes with check. If the bishop comes back to block, I can always just go back here, for example. And it's also attacking this pawn, but I need to defend c7 still. Okay, so my opponent now blocks with his queen. And this is difficult because now I can't go back here. I've also got to protect the knight. So pretty much we are forced to trade queens. And then this huge problem, right? Bishop recaptures. And now my knight's under attack. And I've got nothing defending c7. So this is an unpleasant situation. So I bring my knight back anyway and give up the exchange. So the knight's going to capture my rook. My only hope is that I can recapture the knight. So I play king to d8 and I lose the rook. So I'm a full rook down at this point. Now it's a 10-minute rapid game with both around 7 minutes 20 left on the clock. However, the knight is currently trapped in the corner. So I need to ensure I get the knight back. So now I grab this pawn on e4, attacking the bishop. And now this is a mistake, clearly, by my opponent, because he just walks into a rook fork, forking both rooks, grab that one. This rook now has to retreat away from the center, okay, meaning the rook is now behind a pawn back in the corner. Yeah, so he's ended up in the opposite corner. So here, for example, if I'd captured this rook, it would have given him a free kind of development of the rook. Putting the rooks in the center, lining up the rooks against your opponent's king is all good thing. But for here, I win the exchange back. So right now, we're now in a situation where I've got 7 pawns to his 5, and he's temporarily, I'm hoping, got an extra knight, but the knight has nowhere to go. Okay, so it's trapped in the corner. Now I'm starting to think, okay, well, I need to shore up my position. I also need to find a way to recapture that knight. So I play d6 to reinforce this pawn. Also then can release this light squared bishop. Okay, so I've got ideas. Maybe I might, bring my bishop out to here or here, and then the king can just saunter across and grab the knight. I would prefer not to play b6, because that might give the knight a desperado capture. Okay, takes my pawn, I recapture, I end up with an isolated pawn. Much rather have 2 pawns. Okay, so knight comes in now, threatening f7, and another king rook fork. So I decide to develop my light squared bishop and defend the pawn that way. If he wants to capture, I capture towards the center. That's not too bad. I like having big central pawn blocks. You're quite used to that in the French. But of course, I don't want to move my king here because it lets the knight out. Okay, so he takes and I recapture. Okay, so now we've got interesting pawn islands, right? I've got 2 2s and a central 3 that's slightly advanced. My opponent has a 2 and a 3, like that. Okay, so now I go in and harass his light square bishop. He comes back and harasses my pawn. I play my king to d7. Okay, so now if bishop takes pawn, king can recapture, but still, if knight comes here, I get my piece back and I'm up a couple of pawns. Rook comes across and I play my bishop to e7, which is what I wanted to do anyway, right? Now I'm on 6 minutes, he's just under 5. Rook now comes down, and now we've got a very sharp and tricky situation where both of these pieces are now pinned, right? I've got the bishop looking at my king. I've got the rook looking at my king. I can't move either of these. This pawn may fall. So what do we do? I think at this point as well, it's quite telling that his king is still on the back rank. Okay, so I now, this is the one blunder that I think I made in the game. I now play king to here, trying to attack the rook, right? But rook simply grabs this pawn, and look what I've done. I've stepped away from the c7 square. Okay, rook moves across. Now for some reason I push a pawn, and the knight gets out, and with check. It's a silly blunder from me. Now the knight grabs this pawn, okay? But I have 2 defenders on that square. Knight takes, okay? So that was a mistake by white. Interesting, 1500s I'm finding still blunder, which is good news. Okay, now he pushes a pawn forward, which is not great because what I want to do is, so I actually said to myself, I was talking to myself a lot during this game, I want to push this d pawn so that my king can go to d6. If my king can just step there, it's still defending both of these pieces, but it's also no longer pinned by either of these ones. So that's what I want to do. Now he pushes b5. I bring my rook across now, attacking this pawn. And I figured out that my knight is actually attacking this rook, but my knight can't move because it's pinned by the bishop, right? The only way that white can actually protect this pawn now would be to retreat the bishop. But he can't retreat the bishop because then knight can take rook, because the pin's broken. So he moves his king, I grab the pawn. Okay, now he's down to 1:39, and I'm still just under 5 minutes. I'm using his time for my thinking. So bishop takes h6, and now I get to push my pawn, right? If I can move my king here, suddenly the knight is attacking the rook. Blunder, because it blocks the defense of the other bishop. Simple blunder. Now my knight is no longer pinned. Now my knight is attacking both his bishop and his rook. So rook takes there with check. I simply move out of the way. Bishop comes in, so he's managed to save both pieces, that's good. But now he's under a minute. And now I attack the bishop. Bishop retreats. Grab a pawn attacking the bishop. Okay, the bishop has to stay on this diagonal because it's defending the rook. Okay, and now this traps the bishop. Can you Adam and Eve it? The bishop is trapped. My knight is guarding both of these squares, and my rook is guarding both of these squares. Now, that is a really unusual way to trap a piece, especially on a board with nothing on it, and it's a bishop. Crazy stuff. Anyway, so now he just sacks his rook, moves his bishop there, I counter-attack and he resigns. Excuse me. So really, really interesting game. Now I've definitely learned a lot from it. So what's changed? I mean, what am I doing better? The only thing that I can really think is something along the lines of, it feels like I'm thinking twice. Or I'm thinking twice where I used to think once. Okay? So I'll look at a move, and then I'll see, okay, well, if that happens, what is my opponent going to do? Okay, and then I'll think again, right? Can I find a better move than that? Right? Like they said, I don't know who first said it. When you find a good move, look for a better one, and that's the only difference that I think is going on in my play at the moment. Yeah, the general things about how to play better chess is obviously just calculate better. Take the time, use your time. Right? If you're in a 10-minute game, use your 10 minutes. If you're in a 15-10, use that time and use your increment. Calculate, if this, what's going to happen? Is that better or worse for me? And then think again. Allow yourself the luxury to have another think before you decide on your move. That's all I can say, really, guys, at the moment. That's how I've reached my highest rapid rating so far, 1500. It'll be great to push on to 1600. We shall see what happens. Okay, so there you go. Thought I'd just share that little celebration with you. Thanks for watching. See you later.